What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another Week 12 college football preview, and we are headed to the Big 12 in a giant conference matchup this weekend, going down in the Little Apple in Manhattan, Kansas, on Saturday afternoon. Kickoff 4:30 p.m. Central Time, live on FS1. We have the number 11 Baylor Bears traveling to face the Kansas State Wildcats in a game where the Wildcats are actually a 1 point favorite right now over the Bears. This game was even like while I was preparing for the show, and then they became a 1 point favorite right before I started recording. So I'm assuming the line is going to shift, from even to one to maybe a 1 point Baylor spread. So we'll see. But right now, the Wildcats are the favorite. And this game is not only going to have Big 12 championship implications, but also greatly potentially impact the college football playoff race, as Baylor's right there on the cusp of the top 10. And with a bunch of teams in front of them having to play each other, the Bears might have a long shot at that college football playoff if things just go crazy like they have been this year. But both of these teams ultimately are just looking to make a statement. And let's set the stage before we get into the keys for the game. But for the Bears, they enter 8-2, 5-2 in the Big 12, and they are coming off their best win of the season, an upset win over number 8 Oklahoma last weekend in Waco, Texas. And they still need to win out, though. They have to win out, get some help from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State to find their way to Dallas for the Big 12 championship game. And this weekend will probably be one of their biggest road tests as they travel to a very dangerous Bill Snyder Stadium against a very talented Kansas State team. We're going to find out what this Aranda-led squad has this weekend, and I'm excited to see what kind of show they put on. Now, for the Wildcats on the other side, Chris Kleiman has this team 7-3, 4-3 in the Big 12, and they're in the midst of a 4-game win streak. They're one of the hottest teams in the Big 12 right now, and they're looking to pull off arguably their biggest win of the year and give the Wildcats a chance to reach their first 10-win season since they won the Big 12 championship in 2012. So a lot on the line for Kleiman. It's been a long time since the Wildcat fans have seen double-digit wins, and a win this weekend will keep them on track to get to 9-3 with a bowl appearance to try to get to 10 wins. So I'm expecting all the energy in the world from this crowd and this team as Baylor enters this game. Now, this series was first played all the way back in 1969, but did not become a common series until the late 90s, early 2000s, in which the series still is currently tied 9-9. So whoever wins this weekend is going to finally get that series lead, but the Bears are in the midst of a 3-game win streak over the Wildcats, with the last Kansas State win coming in 2017 in Bill Snyder Stadium. So this is going to be a game of, I mean, you've got a tie series. You've got Baylor on the cusp of top 10. Chris Kleiman fighting for his first 10-win season as the Kansas State head coach. Everything will be on the line this weekend in the Little Apple. Now, let's get to the keys for the game. The key for the Bears, we'll start here, should be clear. And if you've watched any preview of mine or any preview probably on YouTube, you know what the key is going to be. The rushing attack for Baylor is absolutely the focal point and the focus of this offense. Week in, week out, the rushing attack is going to lead Baylor. The test is real this weekend, though. The Kansas State defense has the third best rushing defense in the Big 12, only allowing about 113 yards per game this season. But Baylor's in a class of its own, and especially in terms of rushing the football. They rank number one in the Big 12 with over 237 yards per game. No other team in the conference is averaging over 200, and the Bears rank fourth in the entire country in terms of rushing yards per game. So Baylor does it at an elite level on the ground. And listen, it starts with one name, guys. Abram Smith has had, I would say, well, arguably one of the best years in college football. For me right now, he has a great opportunity to have an argument potentially for Big 12 Player of the Year. He has an argument for the Doak Walker right now as well. along with Kenneth Walker at Michigan State. Abram Smith had over 1,200 yards, over 7 yards per carry, 11 rushing touchdowns. And just in the Big 12, he ranks first in rushing yards, tied for third in rushing touchdowns, and in yards per carry, he's third as well. Abram Smith is going to be an X factor. Last week he had a giant game against the Sooners, and as the season's worn along, him and Treston Ebner really split a lot of carries early. But as the season's moved along, Abram Smith has really established himself as the face of the offense. Now, Ebner will still get some carries over 600 yards, over 5.5 yards per carry. He'll get some shine, but it's all about Abram Smith, man, in this rushing attack. But also don't forget Bohannon, that quarterback, almost 300 yards for him. He had a giant game last weekend and 9 rushing touchdowns, which is top 8 in the conference in terms of rushing touchdowns. So they have 3 guys that can do it at an elite level. And I mentioned last week on our Baylor Oklahoma preview, the Baylor rushing attack is so successful because they have the ability to attack so many different areas of the defense. They can run it outside efficiently. They can run it up the middle efficiently, off tackle, off guard. They can do it everywhere, and it really allows them to be extremely flexible with their play calling and also adjust as to the ebbs and flows of the game. Because if Kansas State starts setting the edge well, they're able to shift their focus inside and trust that running in between the tackles is going to work. So that's what makes Baylor so hard to beat. And also, it allows them to be so creative with their play calling. When you look at just off the edge, almost 1,000 yards rushing, over 8 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns, guys, over 50 first downs generated, and 32 explosive runs when running off the edge. And then when you push it down into just the A gaps, over 600 yards, still 5.5 yards per carry, 28 first downs, and 20 explosive runs generated. They can do it inside, outside, off guard, off tackle. It does not matter. And that's what's going to be a key for K-State, is to try to find a way to slow down this rushing attack. If Baylor runs for over 200 yards this weekend, I have a tough time seeing this team losing this game. So that's going to be something for this Kansas State defense to key on and have to stop. Now, yes, the rushing attack is extremely important, but it's extremely important not only just to run the football, but also to establish a downfield passing attack that's been very electric for Baylor at times. Almost 50% of Bohannon's dropbacks are off the play action concepts. When running play action, you look at Bohannon's stats, almost 70% completion percentage, 1,100 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, only 2 turnovers, 6 big time throws, and an 84.1 Pro Football Focus passing grade. And Tyquan Thornton can make some plays happen down the field at the wide receiving spot too for Baylor. So for me, the play action and running the football are going to be the keys for Baylor this weekend against a fairly talented K-State defense. We're going to get into K-State's D-line just a little bit later, but the rushing attack and the play action attack for Bohannon is going to be a key this weekend. Now, on the other side, Kansas State is also going to try to have to run the ball. That's going to be their key as well. I try not to always pick similar keys, but both of these teams are going to have to establish the run. When you consider that Kansas State has one of the best running backs in the Big 12 as well, and Deuce Vaughn, and then also Skylar Thompson being able to work off the rushing attack extremely well. The Wildcats have a tough test, though. Baylor's only allowing about 120 yards on the ground per game. That's top 4 in the Big 12 as well. Now, listen, the Wildcats consistently lean on the legs of Deuce Vaughn. He was voted the second best running back in the country coming into the season by Pro Football Focus, and he's been extremely electric this year. But Kansas State's averaging over 160 on the ground per game, over 2 touchdowns on the ground per game, and the Wildcats have to turn this into their type of game. They cannot let Baylor control the pace of the game, control the time of possession, and wear down their defense. You have to establish your own rhythm and consistency on the offensive side of the ball in your State. Now, you look at what Vaughn's done this year, man. Over 975 yards rushing, 5.5 yards per carry, 13 rushing touchdowns, and he's a threat outside out of the backfield with 3 receiving touchdowns. He led the country last year in yards per catch for running backs. he's going to be a focal point of the offense. I mean, he's going to have to be the key for this Baylor defense. In the Big 12, he ranks fifth in rushing yards, second in rushing touchdowns, and top 11 in yards per carry. Joe Irvin will be the rotational guy, over 300 yards rushing, two touchdowns, and also Skylar Thompson out, with his legs, four rushing touchdowns this year. But he was coming off an injury earlier this season. You've kind of seen him over the past few weeks really start getting back into his rhythm and flow in this offense. Now, the K-State rushing attack sets the tone. And the reason this rushing attack is hard to stop is because of Vaughn's size. Only 5'6", 170 pounds. And he does an amazing job of using that size to kind of hide himself and just be patient behind his offensive line, be patient, find the hole, and hit it with some explosiveness. And so this is going to be a huge challenge for Baylor's safeties and linebackers to identify where Vaughn is behind this big offensive line and make sure you play sideline to sideline and don't let anything, don't let them hit the hole and explode for a big gain. You look at Terrell Bernard, he's one of the best linebackers in the country. I think the Bernard-Vaughn matchup is going to be one that's extremely important this weekend. But Vaughn's speed and explosiveness off the edge is what really separates him. Over 350 yards off the edge, over 6.5 yards per carry, 11 explosive runs. And Vaughn's number one thing is breaking the first tackle. He has almost 200 of that 350 is after first contact. So when you get your hands on Vaughn, his center of balance and center of gravity is so low that you have to wrap up and use your body weight to get him to the ground. Those arm tackles he is going to run completely through. So that's going to be something this weekend that's going to be extremely important for Baylor, is to get him on the ground when you get your hands on him. If he can break two or three tackles, Baylor's going to be in for a long day in terms of trying to stop this rushing attack. Now, the other aspect of this offense that's going to be important is Skylar Thompson's ability to be a playmaker against this talented Dave Aranda defense. You saw how they got Caleb Williams off his spot. You saw how they got after Rattler when he was put in the game. That Skylar Thompson is going to have to be calm in the pocket and be able to make some plays in the short to intermediate game, because that's where he really thrives in terms of this passing offense. When you look at his short game, it accounts for almost 50% of his throws, and that's a 0 to 9 yard range, almost 80% completion percentage, over 600 yards, two touchdowns, zero interceptions, and 31 first downs. But in the intermediate range, four touchdowns, over 400 yards, and an almost 90 passing grade. So that short to intermediate game is where he really thrives. On the deep ball, he's really struggled looking off safeties. His turnover percentage has really increased when he gets over that 19-yard range. So I'm expecting Kleiman to keep him comfortable, keep him inside the pocket, and let him dump things off and let those wide receivers make plays, and not really put a lot of pressure on Thompson against a very, very talented secondary in Baylor that is actually leading the Big 12 in interceptions right now. So that's going to be the key for Kansas State. Now, the matchup to watch for me this weekend is going to be the Baylor offensive line against the Kansas State defensive line. This is really going to determine if the Wildcats can slow down this explosive rushing attack while also getting pressure on Bohannon to limit that deep ball play action attack that Baylor likes to utilize. So when you look at this Baylor offensive line, they've done an excellent job this season paving the way for that top five rushing attack, but they also have allowed only 8 sacks this season. That's first in the Big Ten and top five in the entire country. They do not allow a lot of pressure on Bohannon. Now, the offensive line has only allowed 34 total pressures over 10 games and only 7 QB hits. Connor Galvin and Galvin Byers have been the highest graded offensive linemen for the Bears this season, and these two guys have only allowed 6 combined pressures. Galvin grades at almost a 90 pass block grade this season over the first 10 games, and no offensive lineman with significant starting experience has graded below a 67.9 passing grade this season. So this offensive line has performed at an extremely high level, but they're going to be tested this weekend. If Baylor's able to win this matchup, pave the way for another 200-yard rushing game, and let Bohannon have time in the pocket to make some plays down the field, Baylor's going to be a very tough team to beat this weekend. Now, also Bohannon's rushing ability out the pocket is another X factor in this matchup because his ability with his legs really helps this offensive line protect him because he can escape pressure if things break down. And last weekend, his ability outside the pocket really opened things up for Baylor after a slow offensive start. 107 yards on only 9 carries and 2 touchdowns last week was the catalyst for a giant Baylor win last weekend. So look out for that as well. But on the other side, the Kansas State defensive line is going to be extremely important this weekend. They are going to have to create chaos in the backfield, and the Wildcats already ranked second in the Big 12 in sacks this season with 26 through the first 10 games of the season and 84 QB pressures. And it all starts with Felix and I believe it's Anu Dyke at the edge spot, man. 11 sacks this season, 14 tackles for loss, and 42 total tackles. If Felix can get going off the edge and wreak havoc like he has been over these past few weeks, Kansas State could be in real business and slowing down this Baylor offense. Also, Nate Matlack has came back from injury. He missed about 5 games. Had a big game last week against West Virginia, but this season also has 3 sacks, multiple tackle for losses, and then also Daniel Green at that linebacker slash defensive line spot, 2 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss, and 63 total tackles. Green could be a big asset for this Kansas State defense in terms of keeping Bohannon in the pocket and also helping stop this run game because you are going to have to stop Abram Smith from being explosive. Now, given all this, man, listen, I've been a K State student. I know what it's like to come play in Bill Snyder Stadium. It is electric. This weekend is going to be crazy because especially with the top 11 team coming. But for me, looking at Dave Aranda's defense last week against the Caleb Williams in a Rattler, I think Dave Aranda is going to have a wrinkle to really limit what Skylar Thompson can do this weekend. And I believe Baylor is going to be able to slow down Deuce Vaughn more than I believe K-State is going to be able to slow down Abram Smith in this Baylor rushing attack. Yes, they've ranked top 3 in the Big 12, but they just haven't seen something like Baylor is bringing this weekend. I think Abram Smith and Bohannon both have big games. I do think this game is low scoring early, but I just believe Baylor's going to score late and kind of put this one away in the Little Apple. I have the Bears winning this one 30-21 over Kansas State, a 9-point win for Dave Aranda's squad. I just trust his defense, and I trust Bohannon and Smith to just be playmakers this weekend and make a handful of plays more than I trust Thompson and Deuce Vaughn this weekend. So a 9-point win for Baylor, 30-21 over Kansas State in Bill Snyder Stadium. Guys, I appreciate y'all choosing the Blue Bloods to get your college football content. Make sure to check out the playlist linked at the end for all our other game previews. If you're new, smash the subscribe button and go ahead and comment your score predictions below and your takeaways of the game. What are you thinking? What do you see in this matchup? And let me know where I was wrong and what you think is going to go down this weekend in Manhattan. But guys, until the next preview, man, the Blue Bloods are out.